Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're coming from, maybe even evening. My name is John Miller. I'm the Director of Marketing for Lead to Goals. And thank you for joining us for a conflict and negotiation webinar here on LinkedIn or through LinkedIn and then through Zoom. We're glad you could join us. A quick bit about our presenter today is Scott DeLong. He is the founder of Lead to Goals. He is a successful business owner who has owned and exited successfully 3 businesses. He's a lifelong learner, having earned a master's degree in leadership development at 54. And then he later went back and received his doctorate in leadership studies. He's a strong passion for the work that he does now and that we do with Lead to Goals. And today is an example of that work. So with that in mind, ladies and gentlemen, this is Scott DeLong.
Hey everybody, thank you for attending. I'm glad you're here. I see a couple familiar faces on, some clients, some former clients, some new folks. This is all great. Today's webinar is going to be on conflict and negotiation. Just so you know, we do 2 different courses on this. So one is an 11-week course where we do both conflict and negotiation, and the other is a short course, a 6-week course. It's just on the conflict portion. So you're not going to, while today there's going to be a lot of information thrown at you, there won't be as many solutions that you'll be able to just start to go and fix. We'll give you some tips and tricks and tools that you can use. But in 45, 50 minutes, we're just not going to be able to get you through the entire realm of conflict and negotiation. So what I like to do first is define what these things are, and then how I've reframed what they are. So the traditional definition is a conflict is a serious battle, typically a protracted one, might be a fight, a battle, a war. It comes about because one or both parties don't like or appreciate the other person's point of view or how they're acting. In fact, most people see conflict as competition. And I'd like to change that a little bit, that thought process a little bit as we go through this. So my reframing of conflict is all conflict is a difference of opinion. Somebody thinks one way, I think a different way. What the battle in between is what conflict does. And if we look at that and get through more of a collaborative approach rather than a adversarial approach, you got a chance for what we'll talk about a little later in the negotiation part as a possibility that the conflict turns out to be something better than what we thought it was going to be originally. In fact, one of the things that I say is conflict can be a good thing. And it can be a good thing because what it can do is create synergy between the parties. And the whole goal here is that everybody gets what it is that they need out of the situation. Maybe not what they went in for, but what they need out of the situation. So why did I put that together with negotiation? Because the negotiation is just a discussion at reaching an agreement. I mean, you start with a conflict, you start with a difference of opinion, because if everybody was seeing things from the same point of view, we wouldn't need to negotiate. We just do the thing that they're talking about. But it's when they have different opinions and want to reach an agreement, the need for negotiation is present. All clear so far? Great. All right. So,
Hey, Scott.
Yes, sir.
That reminds me, just as a quick note, if anybody has any questions regarding the presentation as we work through, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll try to answer them in real time.
Okay. Also, any questions that you might want to have for the end, you can put in the chat if you don't want to unmute yourself and talk. So we're going to have a Q&A portion at the end and open to answering any question the best I can. But if you want John to ask it instead of yourself, then go ahead and put those things in the chat room. So engaging in conflict. So the first thing that requires conflict typically has emotions involved too, right? And those emotions can tend to be negative emotions. In fact, if you do some emotional intelligence work, you'll see that at least 6 of the basic 7 are on a negative side. You get anger and frustration and all those that tend to be, and we bring those into the conflict with ourselves. But if we want positive outcomes for that, then we need to find a way to reset our own emotions, not control your emotions, but to manage your emotion. One of the things that I believe strongly is that the better I manage my emotions, the easier it is for me to influence theirs. So if I want a hostile situation, I'm hostile. If I want a calm situation, then I'm the one that's going to need to be calm so that I can influence the other person. And this is the best way to enter into a conflict from my point of view, if we want these reasonable solutions that are going to work for ourselves. So the first thing that I like to do in the preparation is to reframe this conflict as a difference of opinion as I started. It's not a battle, it's not a fight, it's not a war, it's a difference of opinion. You see things differently than I do. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to try to put myself in your shoes, and I'm going to ask myself, why would a reasonable, rational person have the opinion that they have? Now, you've been in conflicts where you think the other person is not reasonable or rational, they're just fools. I get that. But this is where the managing the emotion place comes in, so that I can get myself in this calm demeanor, and then I can see the other participant as human being that has their needs, their wants, their ideas, and that they're reasonable and rational in what it is that they want. They are just not trying to beat me. If I can reframe in that position, then I've got a chance. I ask myself 3 questions. The first one, what is it that I really want? What is it that I want for the other person? And what is it that I want for the relationship? Typically, not always, typically, that third question, as I've gotten older, has become more important to me than the first 2. Especially in a business scenario. If I want a long-term relationship, I need to put that front and center in my framing of the conflict and the negotiation techniques that I'm going to use. If I just want to win, and I'll give you a scenario where that's present as well. Recently, I went out to Lake Havasu and I was looking at a piece of land. Beautiful property. I thought I'd like it. It was on a golf course that happened to shut down because of a bankruptcy. It was going to have new owners coming up, but to me, I said to myself, okay, I'm going to go in. They want this amount of money. I'm only willing to pay this amount. That's the maximum. And I put that in, and that was just my bargaining position. Here's what I'll pay, right? Because I did not care about the long-term relationship with a one-time seller. If I did that in my organization and I just had a take it or leave it kind of offer, then I'm going to ruin relationships with ongoing folks, and I can't afford to do that. So this is why here's what I really want. I wanted a piece of land, but I wanted it at this price, and I did not care about the long-term relationship with the seller. I was never going to meet that person anyway. I was only going to be working through their agent, right? So in that case, I felt like it was okay for me to make a take it or leave it kind of an offer, which is not a real true negotiation. So once I get through those first 3 questions, what is it I want? What is it I want for the other person? What is it I want for the relationship? Then I need to determine the approach that's going to get me what I want. Do I use power? Do I use persuasion? Do I try to create synergy? And then go back and get myself in a proper frame of mind prior to engagement. So this is all happening. All this engaging happens prior to, so the prep work that I'm going to be doing happens prior to even having a conversation with the other person. Frame the conflict. So when I'm engaging now, if I'm bringing it to them, what I'm going to want to do is frame the conflict from my point of view. Here's how I see it. Here's what I see what's going on. I would ask them how they see things, and I would actively listen to how they're framing it. And I would start looking at the differences between those two. It's that gap that we need to come in. There's several ways of looking at these conflicts, and if you look at Congress, what do they try to do? They go to compromise. That's their first act. I think compromise is a no-win situation. I think it's not lose-lose, but it's nobody's going to win. If I'm giving away things that I want and they're giving away things they want, what I'm trying to do when I see a conflict is see if I can increase the size of the pie instead of just slice the pie up. So I want to see where I'm coming from and listen to where they're coming from. And then I would ask their questions when I'm hearing them. What I'm trying to get to is their why. Why is this position important to them? The problem with that is, and I think why is the most important question that you can ask, although I highly recommend not asking why. Why almost always sounds accusatory. Why would you think like that, right? It sounds like you're talking down to somebody when you ask the question why. So there's other ways of getting to their why without using that word. Well, that's an interesting point of view. Can you tell me more? Help me understand how this would work in this situation. Questions like that to get to their why. The next part, and I say this in quite a few of these seminars, is that when I'm really listening well, I'm going to ask those why type questions several times on the same base question. So if they're giving their point of view, tell me more about that. The next thing that I do is that I try to look into their eyes and figure out the key words in their answer that resonate some sort of emotion in them. And I can see that by paying attention to their body language, right? When they say whatever phrase that they're using, eyes light up or their chest puffs out or their whatever, I would want to ask another question about that thing that I've noticed. So there's a concept that's called the 5 whys, getting down to the 5 levels of why. And again, don't ask the question why, but get there by asking, tell me more. Can you explain? Can you describe? Help me understand. Those kind of questions that you can ask them. Continue to go down the path and you'll finally get down to the real thing. What they say the first time they answer the question is probably not their real issue. It's probably not the deep-seated emotional issue that they're dealing with. So I want to ask questions and continue to go down that path. It does a few things. One, it provides me with ammunition, meaning knowledge, so that I know what direction I'm going to want to go to. But the second thing is this active listening portion will actually influence their mood and their attitude when they feel that they've been heard, when they feel felt. Dr. Mark Golston talks about that. People want to feel felt, right? What that does is it lowers the hostility level. You see the shoulders drop a little bit. You won't see that big forward lean and pounding the desk. When people are actually feeling heard, then they will soften their emotion. You'll get them into a place that you're looking to get them. So the next thing that we try to do, and diplomats are really good at this, they're looking for mutual interest. State those, not the things that we disagree on, but here are the things that we can agree on. State them and agree on them. Put them to the side and move on. So we're working on getting to yes. We're working on finding things that we agree on. And frankly, with humans, there's going to be more things that we agree on than we disagree on. There might be an issue that we disagree on, but there are things around that issue that we can all agree on. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't be in the same room together, right? If we didn't have some sort of mutual interest, we wouldn't be in the same room together. So then I want to state the positions that still differ. So now that I've agreed on all these things, okay, so here are the issues that we're talking about, right? So this is the thing we disagree on, this is the one, and this is one. After that, when you stated those, look for their reactions and again, ask more questions. Again, you're gaining power by deferring your power to them, by letting them make the state, stating those positions. You will actually gain power by giving up some of your power. If I just go in and I start telling people how I see the world, boom, 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 boom. The first thing that happens is that they get defensive and they start putting their defensive postures up. And what I'm trying to do is get those defensive postures down and gain more information that I can use later. Not use in a manipulative way, but use to understand what it is that we can possibly agree on. The next step after that, once we've gotten this all, they figured me out, I figured them out kind of concept, then I'd like to brainstorm and ask their opinion. So I do this in a way that's, hey, I've got an idea. Why don't we X, Y, and Z? And then I ask the question, what do you think? right? So it's not me making a demand. We need to do X, Y, Z. I've got a potential solution. Why don't we think about whatever that X, Y, and Z is going to be, and then ask them their opinion? What do you think? That will draw out so much dialogue when you defer, and you're still getting your point out, but you're doing it in a non-threatening position because you want to hear what they have to say. So that's a really good way to get a negotiation started. So there's a partner, myself and I, we do a podcast, and we've done 2 episodes on conflict. One is framing conflict, and the other one is a conflict resolution process. And I probably would challenge that a little bit, even and say conflict management process instead of resolution, because resolution is not just in your hands. It takes 2, right, to make that resolution, unless there's some power differentiation where you can just oppose your will, and then you're not negotiating anyway. So if anyone's interested in the podcast, there's a QR code there you can scan, or you can just go to the ceopodcast.net. And I don't know, John, are you going to put that in the link so that
I just put the links to both episode 1.13 and 1.14 in the chat.
You'll get a little more depth from this webinar by going there. They're just half-hour sessions, easy to listen to. You're in your car. And if you're interested, you can go ahead and do that. Just get a little, and a different perspective as well. So Vince and I don't always agree on everything, which is great. So if you want to go to the podcast, go ahead and take a look at that, and we'll keep moving on. So negotiation. Probably most of us here have heard the book, about the book, Getting to Yes. Roger Fisher and William Ury wrote that back in 1981, I believe. And one of the things that they talk a lot about, and this is probably, you've heard the conversation or the phrase win-win, right? In a win-win negotiation. And a lot of people credit Fisher and Ury for that, but it actually wasn't them that came up with that. They're working off of a gentleman named Martin Deutsch, who 33 years earlier came up with this concept of win-win. And what Ury and Fisher talk about is that when we have these negotiations, again, remember that there's a reason that we both are there. We do have some mutual interests. Otherwise, why would the other person show up? But they believe that 80% of the time we can get to this win-win solution. There's going to be 20% of the time it's just not possible. The other person's just not willing. We'll go through some of the processes to know what you're willing to do as well here. But if you can walk into a negotiation and 80% of the time, you can realize that we can both get what it is that we need without having to compromise. So win-win is everybody gets what they need. And it's a very collaborative approach. Then there's the win-lose, where one party wins and the other party loses, right? One's going to gain, one's going to lose some ground. Usually a power differentiation between those two, like the person with the more power is going to get the win. In the case of the real estate deal that I was telling you about, I was the one with the cash, so I felt like I had the power, and I was going to impose that power, and they would have lost, probably got what they wanted, get rid of the property, but they would have lost a lot of money in the process had they gone through that. So there's the win-lose. There's the nobody wins, nobody loses, which is compromise. We might both gain something, but there's really not a win when you compromise. And then there's the lose-lose, and the lose-lose is when we walk away from a deal. Nobody got anything out of it. We just wasted time, we wasted effort, we wasted energy. So what we're going to try to focus on is the win-win that Fisher and Ury wrote about in Getting to Yes. And they basically have a 4-part process that they want to separate the people from the problem. Meaning this isn't an adversary sitting over there. There's the problem that we have to solve. So if you focus on the problem and not the people that are sitting on the opposite side, you've got a better chance. If you just think that person's evil and you want to beat them, you're not going to get to a win-win scenario with that, folks, right? People are going to mirror our emotions. If I think you're evil, you probably have a pretty good chance that you're going to think I'm evil. We're going to be so far apart, we're not going to be able to get that. So if you can separate the people from the problem, and they want to focus on interests, not positions. A position is walking in and saying, I want this phone to be blue, right? That's a position. And the interest is, I want to have a phone. I want to be able to communicate. I want it to fit within the theme of the office, right? And that's where I came up with blue. So my interests are having communication device sitting on my desk that fits within the decor of the office. My position would have been, I want a blue phone, right? So focus on interests and not positions. Generate mutual beneficial options. This is what we talked about between the combination of agree on what we agree on already, and then the brainstorming process. And then they also think that you need to use objective criteria for results. Objective criteria means a win would look like whatever your criteria is going to be, having that established. So all of this requires some preparation, right? And thinking about what is it that I want, what does I want for the other person, what do I want for the relationship, is going to require some preparation. And get over here, sorry. Part of this preparation, and again, this comes from Fisher and Urey, it calls the BATNA, the best alternative for a negotiated agreement. If I can't get an agreement on this, the best thing that I can do would be, whatever my options are, take this property in Lake Havasu I was talking about. My best alternative for a negotiated agreement is, in that case, would have been to walk away and not buy a piece of land. Fine. What about the worst alternative for a negotiated agreement? What will happen to me if I don't get this deal? Understand what that is, right? So I have my best possible, and then I have my worst possible, meaning I can't start building my house on a piece of property that I didn't get the piece of property. That's not so bad either, right? For me, in this case, that wasn't so bad. But if I understand what those two lines are, line in the sand here, line in the sand down there, I have an opportunity to see where the zone of possible agreement is. And that happens in two places. One, not only within my own zone, the difference between my best and my worst, and understanding where they are. They're the gap between how I think and how they think. And there is a zone, there's a place that we do some intersection on things that they might want and things that I might want, and that's a zone. So if I'm in my preparation for the negotiation, I'm going to want to figure these things out before I get into the room with the folks, right? And I'm saying write them down, not just have them in the back of your head. Write them down. Writing clarifies thought. A lot of thoughts that swirl in my head, and if I just keep in my head, they might get confused and conflicted and all that. But if I actually take the time to write things down, then I have a much better understanding of what's important to me and then why it's important to me. The other thing that I like to do is try to take a look at this from their point of view. If I was in their shoes, now I can't be in their shoes. I don't know their history. I don't know necessarily, this is in advance. I don't know what's important to them or why it's important to them, but I can imagine that, right? I can guess on why they're in the room. I'd want to go through this for them as well. I'd put this on a piece of paper. What's the worst thing that can happen? What's the best thing that can happen? And where is the zone of possible agreement between their gap and then my gap, and combine those two? And I'm pretty well prepared to walk in and have a negotiation. So, and it's still not enough, right? It's just, these are just my thoughts right now that I've already, if I put a package together and I've written all this stuff down, these are just coming from my thoughts themselves. So what other research can I do to find out what might be important to them, rather than just think of why it's important to them? What other research can I do to find a better alternative, or a different alternative that I can do? Maybe I can look at other properties in Lake Havasu. Maybe I can find a different lake that I might want to be at, right? So doing some research on my own, and then understanding where these folks are coming from. Do I know if these people are already struggling financially, or just need to get out of the state, or whatever the scenario is going to be? And a lot of that research can be done in advance before you get in the room as well. And then the ultimate outcomes. Now that I've done all this research, I'm going to ask myself these questions again. What do I want? What do I want for the other person? What do I want for the relationship? But this also tells me when to walk away. When things, this is my point, the line in the sand that I can't get any of what I want, and then it's time to walk away. So that's the lose-lose scenario, right? When is it in my best interest to no longer be in the room? Chris Voss, some of you may have heard of Chris. He has a different position. He is a former FBI negotiator, hostage negotiator. He has a company called the Black Swan Group that works with businesses and others. They still do a lot of hostage kind of work. And he has a completely different approach to negotiation. So if you want to read two books that really contrast with each other, there's some overlap, but there's a big contrast. It's Getting to Yes and Never Split the Difference. So Chris, and there's a reason for that, right? As a hostage negotiator, it's a win-lose deal. There's no win-win with a hostage situation. The person holding the hostage isn't going to get their plane and $1 million to fly off to the Cayman Islands, and the person is going to survive, right, and be unaffected. That's just not going to happen. The world can't allow those kind of things to happen. So he is in a win-lose hostage negotiation situation all the time, which is why he does a hard bargaining position. I'm not a big fan of his approach. I mean, there's some really good things in there in his book, but in most situations, remember, the third question in business situations, the third question is more important to me. What do I want for the relationship? In this scenario, and in the hostage negotiation or the Chris Voss's way of going about this, I don't care about the other person. They're going to jail and they're going to die. Those are the possible outcomes for those folks. And so his approach works. He was very successful in it. And if you want to be a hard practicing technician, read this book, follow it word to word, because it works. It works. Very short-term solutions though. It gets the hostage out. It gets the deal you want. If you don't care about the long-term relationship, go to the never split the difference kind of concept. Be in a mirror. You don't feel their pain. You label it. You master the no. You look for trigger words. A lot of those things we do as well in our approach, in the looking for the trigger words. Remember earlier I said you can tell someone's body language, things that trigger them, and then find out more about that. This is a much more manipulative approach to negotiation. So while we discuss it in our course, we don't focus on it as a useful tool because it's not in most business scenarios. Other things that become important in the negotiation portion is setting the stage, understanding where the negotiation is going to be held, and organize the room based on the tactics you want to employ. I see a gentleman on the call that taught me something really well. Dan Englund taught me about setting up the room for success. And see, take a look at this conference room that's on the table right now. And if there are only 3 of us in the room, this is a horrible setup, right? So one of the things that Dan taught me was that if there's only going to be 6 people in the room, you only want 6 chairs around the table. An empty chair represents empty space. It represents something missing. It represents a negative energy. And setting up the room is really kind of an interesting concept that it seems minor, but it's subliminal. So Dan, thanks for that pitch or that trick. And then organize the room based on the tactics you want to play. For instance, if I want to use the, yeah.
Sorry, since you called me out, I thought I would just pipe up just for a second. Well, one of the little subtleties for that is when you mention no empty chairs is literally to push those chairs away from the conference room so that there's no physical barrier between anybody. It sort of connects the energy, the circle of energy in the room, that there shouldn't be any empty chairs. They should all be pushed away.
To go further than that, and we're talking about negotiation now, but that energy approach, the word physical barrier that Dan used there is really important. So quite often, if I'm working with clients I don't even have a desk between us. It's just two chairs with space and not a physical barrier, because that's a representation as well as a barrier between you and I, a safe zone, if you will, that some people might need and might feel, but it really can make people uncomfortable without having, you're sitting 3 feet apart without a desk between us. So, some people get a little weird about that, but it creates a different atmosphere. So the room really matters. And setting up that room is kind of an important piece of that. If you want to get what it is that you want to get, start deploying some of the techniques. So prepare yourself, know your stuff. That's the preparation and the work that we've done beforehand. Remain calm. Build trust by listening with the intent to understand. Stephen Covey concept in the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People: listen to understand, as opposed to listening to reply. Listening to understand is going to elicit more questions from me than statements from me. Trust me, you'll get your time to make your statements. You'll get your time to make your point of view. Then you're going to also want to deploy neutral language, not blaming, state your interest, not the positions, not a lot of you statements. I mean, anyone that's gone through marriage counseling understands that. Well, you do this and you do, no, here's how I feel. Here's what I see, kind of statements, I statements instead of you statements. So your language becomes really important as well. And then looking for the mutual interest and start building on those, just like the diplomats do. What are the things we can agree on? Let's start there. Brainstorming for alternative solutions. So now that we've got the things we've agreed on, what other alternative solutions? If you working on interest and not positions, go back to my scenario, maybe a blue phone isn't what I really need. Maybe it's a conference phone that would suit my needs better. And I didn't even thought of that. But this is where the brainstorming kind of concept comes in, is looking for alternative solutions with the other person, using the tell me more to build upon their ideas, because that's how we're going to create synergy. Agree on a solution. And this is really important in negotiations. Once we've agreed on the solution, what is the method for follow-up and the accountability? We've all made agreements with people that the other person didn't honor. Does a lot of negative and a lot more damage than not coming up with a solution in the first place when you're not honoring the agreement. So, and it could be as subtle as, hey, we're going to check in on Tuesday to make sure we're on track. Something along those lines, right? Once we have the objective resolutions that we're looking for, and then we're going to have accountability. You're in charge of this. I'm in charge of this. These things that we need to do. The other person needs to hold that people accountable, not in a looking over their shoulder and demanding kind of way. Hey, how are we doing on that? We up to speed? Everything on track? Can you tell me more? Those kind of concepts will keep people accountable. Most people will just need a subtle reminder. If they're not holding up their end of the bargain, remember, it's a bargain they made. It's something that they want to do. They're going to want to perform. And sometimes life gets in the way, right? Work gets, children, whatever it is that's going to create the stresses, that it's going to put this negotiated agreement on the back burner for some reason. Sometimes all they need is a gentle reminder. If Tuesday comes up, say, hey, how are we doing on that deal? Here's what I've got going on, right? I'm doing my part, without being accusatory in that, will generally be enough to get people moving in the right direction again. Other part on this, especially if you want to have a good relationship with the end, is make sure you thank them for their part, right? They may not thank you, and that doesn't matter. But doing your part to thank them for what you were able to accomplish. I'm glad we got this done. I appreciate how much effort you put into this. I can't wait to see the end result. It goes a long way. So on our website, and John will put the link in the chat, there's some tools that we've put together for folks. Some of these kind of pre-work tools, things that you can, we went pretty fast through this, but there's one called Understanding Conflict. It's just a little downloadable sheet that you can do if you'd like to get that. And then the conflict resolution process. and simple, not depth, but simple enough to get your mind working towards this. So if you're interested in having some takeaways from this, there's a couple on the website there, and just click the link and you'll go right. I think you'll go right to it and be able to download the documents that you need. Questions?
We did have one through the chat, Scott.
Okay.
So somebody asked, what happens when you're working on a deal or negotiation with someone far away, so you only communicate through technology, and that person ghosts you? You care about the relationship, but it seems they don't, because they don't respond to anything you say. How can you confront them to ensure that you'll be heard?
So I care about a relationship more than you care about the relationship. It's what, and how can you handle someone that's ghosting? You might not be able to, right? Again, it takes two to dance. If they don't want to dance, you're not going to be able to dance. So my recommendation would be try again, and try again. Most of us, though, and we have another course on this on business and professional communications, most of us try through a very safe methodology, which is the email, right? Hey, just checking in kind of stuff. You want to get someone's attention, pick up the phone and call them. Leave a voicemail if you have to. If they don't answer your call, hey, I'm concerned that we haven't talked. I'd really like to get back to this. Please give me a call. I'm available Monday at 10, Tuesday at 2, whatever works better for you, would be the approach that I think would be more successful than just sending out an email. Hey, checking in. When can we get together? Because emails are really easy to ignore. Yolanda's got a question. Do we need to unmute her? Yolanda?
Looks like she unmuted.
Can't hear you if you're talking, hon. Yolanda are our friends. I don't want to be derogatory. Yolanda, we can't hear you. So if you got a question, go ahead and type it in, and John will get it out. No, it's very.
It's really staticky.
Staticky. Well, she's working on that. Is anyone else? Yeah, I don't think that the communication portion is working. Yolanda, why don't you type something in and John will read it off to us.
In the meantime, I did have another question.
Okay.
Let's see. It says, someone appreciates the concept of reframing conflict, but we're all human. How do you maintain staying, as you said, in the proper frame of mind when the person on the other side of the table just may not be practicing that approach at all?
Yeah. So we teach this a lot in our emotional intelligence course, but also in our communication course, is that there are times, right? So go to the emotional intelligence course. One of the things that I like to do is to get people in a learning process, in mindfulness learning process. So breath work works, but you can't just try it once while you're at the table and expect it to do anything for you. So we go through this process of practicing different techniques in breath work and or meditation, a combination of both. It's really fascinating that practice makes perfect, right? Perfect practice makes perfect. But I've gotten myself to a spot where, because of how much I've practiced that breath work, when I get into those emotion-filled, and we all get them, right? My face turns red, smoke comes out of my ears, all of that. It usually takes me one good breath to get back into the state where it's going to, and only because I practiced, right? I wouldn't be able to do that otherwise, but I can, knowing intentionally when I go into the mindfulness techniques, I can bring it up when I need to by just go, come back in. People will be hostile because they're hostile. You cannot control them, but you can influence them. The easiest way for me to continue that hostility, their hostility, is to puff up my chest, lean forward, pound on the desk. Guess what? They're going to mirror that. Yet if I go to this breath work process that works for me, and all of a sudden the wrinkles on my face kind of calm down and you see my shoulders droop a little bit, that provides the opportunity for them to get there too. Okay, still might not work. Very possible. So there's a technique that we teach in the communications course, is that it is okay to step away. So we call it step out, but then step back in. So I step out. Hey, listen, John, this isn't going the way that I want. Why don't we take a few minutes? Go get a glass of water, go whatever, or circle back up tomorrow, or whatever the time frame you think it's going to take for you to get to this calm state again, and hopefully influence their calm state, get them to think and self-reflect if possible. They may not be the type. Again, there's this doesn't always work. In 5% of the cases, you're dealing with a narcissist or a sociopath. Just the facts. 5% of the US, narcissists and sociopaths. It won't work with them. You can't influence them. They don't care. They are just going to want to get what they want. So that the two techniques are, one, practice mindfulness, so enough so that you can draw upon it when you need, when you feel the hostility coming up. And second, there are just some times that we need to take a break. Remember your mom telling you to count to 10 before answering? Yeah, you can ask for that in negotiation. I need a few minutes. I'm going to go get a cup of coffee. I need a few minutes. I'm going to go do something to step out of that situation so that it doesn't just escalate. Dan's hands up.
We have a few more questions here too.
Okay.
So, do you want to go to Dan first?
Anyone who wants to go live can go live. I like the live. People talking.
I'm happy to talk. I hope I don't.
I remember that.
So this might be a version of a question you've already answered, Scott.
Okay.
What I'm asking is maybe a two-part question. Is one is if it's the other person who's having trouble remaining calm,
mm-hmm.
what steps might you take to kind of help dissipate the energy, or what about that? And the other sort of second version of that is if there's a noticeable power differential in that space where you're kind of at the bottom end of that,
yeah.
Or different. How do you engage in that way?
Well, so let's go to the first one. So I'll tell you what doesn't work. Right? Trying to control their behavior. And I actually did this one time. I heard this at one time. Forgive me. I've had to ask my wife forgive me for this before, but there was a time where she was just out of control and I was going to fix that. So I sprayed her with a little spray bottle like you do with a cat to get him to jump off the counter. That didn't work. I'm telling you, I cannot control somebody's negative behavior by squirting them with a bottle of water or anything that I want to do. All I can do is influence them, and that is model the behavior that you want to see. And it will work most of the time, but it won't work universally. The second one had to do with power, and this is a really interesting dynamic. Power is everywhere, right? And I'm going to talk about the person with the most power right now. The opposite of the question Dan asked, and I understand that. But if I want to engage in more dialogue, if I want to get more feedback from the other people, the thing that's most important for me to do is to try to equalize the power difference in the room. If I hold this much power over this person, I am not going to get all of the honest, completely honest, vulnerable kind of questions. When I try to equalize that power and bring mine down, raise theirs, whatever it might be to equalize that power, I have a better chance of a successful negotiation. To your question, when there is a power difference and the other person's a jerk, there's really not that much you can do about it. That is when you go to the WATNA, the worst alternative, right? That's when it's time to, if you have the ability, to walk away. Or in some cases, you might have to give in. The problem is, if somebody continually having you give in, most people are going to hold resentment and they will end up walking away at some point, probably walking away from the company. So for those in a position of power, if you want your way, all of the time, and you don't mind turnover, go ahead and impose your power, because the turnover will happen. It will happen. May not today, but it will happen. For those without power, how much can you tolerate? You just have to ask yourself that, right? When is my walking away point? So you can't, if you're in the lower position and they're in the higher position, you can't trump their power. I just don't know of any techniques that are going to work. Certainly modeling the behaviors to see if you can get there. But if they're in that mindset, they're not going to change their position. How much can you take before you have to walk away? John, you got more questions?
Yeah, I got another one here. So someone's asking if you have any suggestions on how to handle a conflict with an employee that is a union employee and may proceed with a sense of entitlement. And due to their situation, whenever the conflicts are occurring, they can't really easily be suspended or terminated. So how to approach that kind of a situation.
So again, there's a power difference in that. So one of the things that I encourage managers that are dealing with and whether it's union or not, right? If you have to get what it is that you want and the other person's not going to like your decision, most companies, most organizations have a grievance process, and certainly the unions have a grievance process. So don't fight it. If you're the management position in this, don't fight that. Just say, no, I appreciate it. You have the right to do that. And as long as it doesn't take a lot of time, you can actually use company time to write your agreement, to your grievance. So be willing to participate in the grievance process. Will lessen their hostility a little bit anyway. They have the right to it anyway. There's not much you can do about it, right? If you can't use and docking somebody's pay, firing them, all those are coercive behaviors in the first place, right? And if you don't have the ability for the coercion, then all you can do is work towards the cooperation. So I would go next to find out more about what their needs are and what their concerns are. Help me understand. Go to those 5 why kind of questions, right? Continually go down that path. One, you may get to what it is that they need, and maybe you can do something with what they really want, right? Not the demand that they made, but what they really need. Maybe there's something that you can do. And if there's not, at least going through that process should lower the hostility. So the grievance still might be written. It just might not be written as you're such a tyrant, right? Here's what I wanted. So you do the best you can. Again, remember, we talked about 80% of the negotiations you're going to enter, you can get to a win-win solution. And there's going to be 20% that you just can't.
The last question I have here is, where do you find the most success using power, persuasion, or the synergistic approach? Or is there different levels of success you should expect with each approach?
I think I lead with the synergistic approach, meaning if we're working with a synergistic approach, we can actually make that pie bigger. We can come up with solutions that neither one of us had thought of previously. So I lead with that. And I find that the problem with it is that it takes more time, right? This whole brainstorming concept and listening to understand and all of that takes a lot more time than just imposing your power and say, just get it done because I'm the boss, right? And we've all dealt with those situations before. But so I lead with the synergistic of having the most positive outcomes. The persuasion, anyone ever heard of buyer's remorse? Anyone ever felt buyer's remorse when a salesperson sold you something and at the moment you handed over your money, but then later you felt bad about it? I'm not a big fan of trying to use persuasion as much as I am creating synergy and dialogue. Now, it's a technique and it's useful, and I may need to persuade someone to hear what it is that I'm trying to get to, certainly. So there's dealing with persuasion. You have a lot of things that you take advantage of, utilize, which is your knowledge, your skill set, your ability to get things done. All of those have personal power. And then the professional power that you might have, your position, the coercion, rewards and punishment, you can use those. But I like to use those things as the last resort, and only if I need to get something done, because there are consequences. There are negative consequences. Even with motivation, there are negative consequences. There's a story that Daniel Pink talks about in one of his books, that if you try to motivate your child to take out the garbage by giving them $1 or $5 every time he takes out the garbage, when you no longer pay that child for that job, that child will no longer do that job. It's worth $5 to them. They're not getting their $5, they're not doing it. That's the way it works. As opposed to working in an influence scenario where you will try to get that job, taking out the garbage, as part of their intrinsic value, makes them feel good about participating within a family. And that's possible, but it takes longer. It takes longer to get those thoughts with people than it is just to pay them to get the job done, than to motivate them. We can motivate them through scare tactics. We can motivate them through positive rewards, certainly, but there are consequences to all those things. Anybody else?
Yeah, feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions.
And while you're doing that, we'll move on to the next. One of the things that we like to offer is a free 15-minute needs analysis. We have our business development manager that will get on the call for you and kind of discover if there's anything that we can help with, or just provide some answers, kind of like we've done here. But you can get a hold of us at info@leadtogoals.com or at the number 949-391-9982. Also, John's going to put in the chat box a link to our business development manager's calendar. So if you want to schedule a 15-minute appointment, have them answer any questions. Not a sales presentation at all, but it's just to find out what it is that we might be able to help with, or that we're not the right place that can provide you help. So that's available to everybody here as well. And the other thing I wanted to let you know is that we have a short course, conflict and negotiation. It's 6 weeks. It's an hour and a half a week, once a week for 6 weeks. It's a really powerful thing. If you take what we've done here and go deep into it, provide you exercises and that sort of thing. We used to only do this for organizations, where an organization would hire us to come in and do this, but we've created a 6-week short program for individuals. If you've been on this webinar, we'll give you $300 off on it as well. So if you're interested in that, the next one will start May 4th, once a week, 6 straight weeks. Really a pretty good course if you're interested in that. And then lastly, we want to let you know that we have another seminar coming up a month from now, May 10th. It's a free webinar again on executive leadership. So that will be, just as you signed up for this one on LinkedIn, that will be in the same kind of a format, but there's a link in the chat right now that you can link up to that if you're interested in getting into the next month's presentation. And as far as I know, this is the end of the presentation. So I wanted to make sure we thanked you for attending. And if anybody has any more questions, we'll be on for a few more minutes. Stay on to 11 o'clock. And if you have any questions, go ahead and pop in if you're anything I can do to help you. Thank you very much for showing up.